Okay, so before started, I believe a lot of you already heard of the name IDM. So recently, I have some agency call me saying, "Hey, are you available for an IDM work?" So the first thing I would like to know is that IDM, if you do a search in Google saying IDM, there's a lot of product other than SAP. Because I think it's more than 10 companies claim that they have identity management product. So if put the identity management in here, you will find a lot of products, not only SAP as IDM product, but also say Wikipedia, Oracle, and this one, Gartner. Yeah, I heard of this company as well. And then there's a whole bunch of CA as well, a whole bunch of company. So SAP wasn't the #1 IDM software in there. So what's the reason that needs the IDM to manage all the identities? So one of the reasons that I know that basis administrators and security administrators, their daily work sometimes to create users and then to maintain user, assign roles and so on. But however, in an enterprise company, there are more activities like that, such as for example, if a new employee just onboarding to the company, you have to create a lot of IDs for them, the email IDs and Active Directory IDs and SAP IDs across multiple systems, and then also maybe have database IDs, and then have all kinds of things, JDBC, for example, Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2. And some other companies not really using Active Directory, but instead using the Novell or Tivoli and so on. Let me show you some of the basic user creation. So, you know what? Let me mute a little bit for all things in here. Mute. So creating a user in SAP is very easy. So I believe everyone, once they install their own system, they have a chance to create users by their own using SU01, right? So SU01, as you see that in here, for example, randomly log into one of those systems. No route. Sorry, what's happening here? So let me see. Could be what? Everything could be maybe my host names. Something wrong in here. So if you log into any of the environment, as you can see, that many years ago when SAP has the the R3 released, at that time they don't have a CUA concept in there. So what users do to create IDs in here, this is not a good example to creating IDs, because this system has been integrated with CUAs. So there's a migration path between the user creation. So let me open a PowerPoint. I would like to put some illustrations in here. So here we're only talking about the SAP user creation. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, everything to create is by SU01. And then later, in the year of maybe 2002 or something, 2003, when the social manager shows up, they started using CUA to manage multiple SAP landscape. And after that, the IDM product shows up. So if we're talking about history, it's very simple, easy. SAP doesn't really have a long history to manage the user identity. But why it needs this kind of developments, and one of the reason is in SU01, in those era, in those years in last century, SAP didn't even have a Java instance in there. So at that time, that most of the companies, they only have 1 or 2 SAP systems in the landscape, But later, for example, when I look at my logon pad, I have more than 10 SAP systems in here. So to be able to manage, to easily create IDs in here, you don't have to log into each system. Instead, you using your social manager, or you can choose a non-social manager to create a CUA system, such as this one. So in here, as you can see, our CUA has a CUA model. CUA model is based on the IDOC. So we have 5 systems integrated into CUA. So let's say somebody would like IDs and to do something. So let me see what happened. Update. No, so all the things, something wrong in there. So to be able to create an ID, I don't have to log into all these 5 systems. I only need to log into social manager. So for example, in this case, when I look at my IDs, I can see I have access to all the 5 systems, actually including social manager itself. It's like 6 systems, and all the systems have the roles and profiles in here and there to assign to it. And some of the other companies, their development system have more than one client, like client 100, client 200, client 600, and so on. Why they have multiple clients? Because they're different purpose. A very good example of SAP is the client usage. The special development systems, they have configuration client, they have development client, and they have unit testing client. So to be able to create IDs in there, this is ideal to using the CUA model to manage all the clients across 2 different systems. But later, why they need IDM? Because the NetWeaver also have a Java instance. So Java instance, for example, I'll show you some of the things in here. So for example, the portal system is one of the good example of a Java instance. So NetWeaver system has its own user administrations. The user, it wasn't created by SU01, because SU01 really it's only for the ABAP system, but instead their user, if I put an ARI in there, you see the backend database. I configured the UME database to point to the LDAP. But originally, when the system, the NetWeaver is newly installed, it wasn't pointing to the UME LDAP system, but instead it's have its own database acting as the UME, the user management engine. So that you cannot really using SU01 to create it. Instead, at that time you have to log into the NetWeaver to create the user IDs in here. So this actually duplicates efforts of the system administrator. So in this case, if a system administrator needs to create ID for a new employee, he might need to log into all the systems, and as well as the NetWeaver system, maybe one or more NetWeaver system Java instance, to create IDs for the user, not to mention in the LDAP. The Active Directory also need to create. So it's really duplicate and then the double the efforts or triple the efforts of the procedure how to create an ID. Another good example is when a user is offboarding. Let's say it's resigned from the company, is leaving the company, then you need to figure out how to delete the user IDs, and this time it has a hard time to find out where the ID is in use. So it would be a very good idea to have an all-in-one single entry point of identity management system to have an overview of all the users, to see actually how many systems, how many database, or how many applications they have access to. So this IDM connector document is the one that I randomly find from the internet, and one page you give a very good highlights of how the IDM is working and what functionalities it supports. So we can see the identity management right now, it supports the ABAP systems. For example, ABAP system, where in here SAP Identity, so this stands for the normal ABAP. And then it also supported the success factor, and then also the GRC in here. And then when we see the external LDAP is sitting in the technical part, for sure you can also manage the database, HANA database, SQL Server, Oracle, and so on. So here I would like to find some of the technical architectures of how the IDM works. because here I don't really draw the architecture by myself. Instead, I just find it randomly in the Google. Right? Let me show you if this picture is big enough. Here. So this chart highlights the key component of the latest IDM version 8. Right now it's the patch 4. So IDM, most user interfaces you can use Developer Studio. In this case, it's Eclipse or the ones that are using HANA Studio, but it's the same thing as the Eclipse. I will show you the interface a little bit later. And then you also have IDM, the runtime components. The runtime components including a dispatcher and the runtime. And in here, the IDM Center database, this is the core component. So for the installation of the enterprise companies, for example, your clients are looking for IDM solution, you would need to provide solutions in there. The IDM database, it need to be sitting in a hot backup, and then have high availabilities to support the failover as well. This is very important. You cannot make the database down in a single second, otherwise all the connectivity will fail. As you can see, all these components, they connected to the database. So the identity manager, the database, you can choose Oracle, you can choose DB2, and then you can choose SQL Server. But the things that right now it doesn't support HANA. You cannot really using a HANA, SAP HANA to host the IDM database. And then in here you can find the VDS, the Virtual Directory Service, that can give you like an easy view similar to the LDAP. And finally, you will need a NetWeaver application Java instance to host all those components. The components including the Dev Studio, the end user's UI and administrator UI, and the REST API. And then lately, they also have like a UI5 component need to be deployed in here. So how to use is that the developers or actually administrators in here need to log into the Eclipse or HANA Studio to connect it to the this component, and then the contents of the IDM key items can be synchronized to the NetWeaver systems, and then you can use the user interface in here. Where's the user interface? User here, end user interface to log into the Java, and then using this one end user UI to view all these items. So next I'm going to show you one by one how this thing looks like. So first of all, Developer Studio. So Developer Studio, I have something here. So this basically is I'm using a HANA Studio to connect to IDM. But as you know, HANA Studio just like a wrap up Eclipse. So what happens in here, I'm using the Oracle as a backend database in here. So the Oracle database, the configuration you can see in the preface in here, the connections, even though I name it as Oracle, but you can see that it's connected to my NetWeaver application server Java instance and the port 5001, and then have a data source of these things where these things comes out. So we go back to this this chart. So when you try to use Developer Studio to connect it to the component, actually what it connected to is connected to, as you can see here, NetWeaver AS Java application. And this Developer Studio, and it shows up in here, it representing as an IDM data source. How this thing happens? I will log into the NetWeaver to take a look. So in here, you go to System Administrations. So in here, the Content Administrations. No, what? Too slow. So you go to NetWeaver Administrators. I would prefer using the maybe using a virtual machine is faster. So the one we can see that it's using the shock PO, and then we go to NWA. So as you can see in here, it mentions what? Mentions the I'm going to so it actually connects to the NetWeaver Java instance. In this case, the port 5001, this is the HTTPS port. I can go to here as well, because the HTTPS port is also opened. 5001. Right. So I'd like to show you where these things coming from. These things coming from, actually, it's a JDBC connections in here. So we go to our resource in here, systems resource. And it's actually a custom data sources, and you can see here there's an entry IDM data source Dev Studio. So this item is Dev Studio, right? This name need to match perfectly in the NetWeaver systems. So in the how these components come from, in the, by the way, as you know, in the Eclipse, when a standard installation, you can install all kinds of components on top of the Eclipse, or in this case I use HANA Studio. Why do you think doesn't respond? So if you go to install new software, and anyway, that one already installed. If you go to Neon, oh, my Eclipse for some reason it's slow. Why? Yeah, it is slow. So we go to Development Studio. It could be my internet speed is too slow. So in here, you know what? Not this one. It should be this one. For some reason, this thing doesn't work. Something wrong here. Yeah, this side is okay. I just don't know why this thing doesn't really shows up. Storage in your software. Without HTTPS. Right, so in here I type without HTTPS, so that if you want to install, what you install is that you go here in Identity Management tool, you will find Identity Management Studio available to be installed. So after installed in there, you will be able to find that your installed software installation details. You have it in here. So Identity Management Developer Studio. So after you have this thing installed, you will be able to open the Identity Management Studio, and then as I mentioned in here, the Windows. So first step you want to do is that in the connection, you would like to create a new connectors. In this case, I name it as IDM Oracle because my IDM these components in here. Where's it? One of the components I'd like to show you. So this component I install in Oracle in the Identity Center database. This one I install in Oracle. So the installation here, by the way, I put down all the details into the website. You can go here. As I just try to reorganize everything that the installation details. I put the IDM 8 step-by-step installations in here. The first step for all the IDM product installation to always be install the database part, what we call Identity Management Core. Identity Management Core is in here. As back you go here, right? So when you install Oracle, you have a lot of options to be figured out. By default, the prefix you can see here users, so that you have to create a table space in there accordingly. I break out all the details in here in case you would like to do the same. So first step after you install Oracle, what it did is just created a whole bunch of users in here. This user will be in use in all the connectors in the future. It starts with by default the prefix name is MXMC. So let's go back to the Eclipse. So the connectors in here, it connects you to the NetWeaver system, the port, and the data source, name it in here. And then there's another items in here, also the Java install GIEs in here. One of the items you would like to find out is in here. You need to mark down the path in here, and then you have to install install a client certificate to the GIE. Why that is required? Because as you can see here, the IDM connections in you using an HTTPS connection to the NetWeaver systems. As NetWeaver system, you can see in here. Where's my stuff? Right. So this is a HTTPS connections. HTTPS connections need a client certificates in here. So what you do, you have to download the certificate, download this guy, and then install into the Java the security store. Otherwise, the connection won't be available. That step I record down in one of the maybe in the page 2, somewhere because that's a big piece. Without install that item, the error will shows up. Let me try to find right in here. I record down if that thing is not installed, you will find something logon failed unrecognized SSL message. So in that case, you have to use the command line key tool to import the certificate into your Java runtime, so that you will be able to connect it to your development studio, your IDM studio. So after you connect to the IDM studio, you can see in here what else you would like to see. So the rest of them is, these things become very slow. Don't know why. My network speed is something wrong. So we go here. So the package by default in here, there's nothing in here. So all these items are imported to the packages in here. Import by default. This list is empty. So what this package do is that SAP, when they deliver the IDM, they provide a predefined connectors for all kinds of products. So for example, this is a connector to ABAP, and then there's other connectors to AS Java applications, and then there's connector to HANA, and then SuccessFactors, right? SFS and SuccessFactors, and then there are other things, HTML5. This is a form. This is not connected. This is a form. So what this thing is, this, if you go to any of this, so times out. So this is a predefined, maximize this thing. This is a predefined repositories acting as a package that have all the information in here. Without this thing, you won't be able to import your ABAP source. I will talk about how to import the ABAP source a little bit later, but first we go back to this chart. So we're talking about the Developer Studio connect into here. So another key item is the dispatcher. So what is a dispatcher? So dispatcher in here, what you can see here is that this thing is a dispatcher. This is just like a very simple installation of a application. In this case, the dispatcher, it supports the Windows platform and also supports the Unix or Linux platform. So in our case, we install the dispatcher in our Windows 2012 server. So in here, what you can see that it had after installation, the installation is very straightforward. Dispatcher is because installing this have a sequence. So first of all, you install the database, and then second, you install the dispatcher. And I also record down all the step by step. If you go to the page 1, you can see that the dispatcher installation is very easy. So right after you install the database, and then the next time the runtime components. So runtime components in here. So it's this thing actually is the dispatcher. So after install that, the key file is another thing that it acting as communicating across all the IDM infrastructure. So when you install the dispatcher in here, you have to finish the configuration. So configuration, the only part is that in the settings in here. So you will find that one the item is it needs a JDBC connection to the database, because like I said, everything, all the information, the database is acting as a very important part. It hooks with all the components across the IDM infrastructure. So we're using the dispatcher to connect to JDBC, using JDBC driver to connect to our Oracle, and then the one of the items in here, you can see the connection string right in here. Cannot really show. So this is more like a wizard. So it connected to our Oracle database that we installing there and using the MXMC admin, right? So MXMC admin is one of the connector users that created by the installation script in the very beginning. As you can see, MXMC admin, right? It created in here. When you're running the database installation, it's basically just a shell script. Its shell script has a SQL script, a SQL script in the Oracle to create not only the table space, not only the users with the table base, but also it defines a password for MXMC users. So MXMC users in here, it's connected to the backend database, and then there's also a key file. Let me see what's a key file. Runtime settings. So the key file, I think it's defined in the somewhere. Not in here. Not in here. So the key files at this step is not creating in the dispatcher. Dispatcher is running in the machines. It could be installed in a dispatch in distributed environment, but in this case we also install the VD as servers, the virtual directory server, into the same server. So let me try to see that where the key files located, because I do remember the key files are sitting somewhere. DSE home. Let me see. So by the way, this key file, when you generate it, it's a utility that you can use to run in the Unix environment, or you can Linux environment, or you can install in the Windows. So when you try to install, you can create multiple keys, like the number 1 key or the second key and so on. So in here we only need to create one key, and this key need to be copied across all the your environment, which running, for example, running the dispatcher, and this one as well. In here, I think I also have a key file configured in here as well. Check config. So this is the VDM servers. So the key store preference. So now config. So where is the configurations properties? Not in here. Right, so there you can see here the encryption key file shows up everywhere. And this key file that I copied from the Linux box, because after we generate the key file from the Linux, it needs to be distributed to all the environment. The distribute is not done automatically, it's done manually. So you have to copy this file to the environment accordingly. And this is not the only place that we're using, and there are also other places this key file is in use as well. For example, if you go to the J2E administrator, place. Let me see, go home. So if we go to system, Java system properties, applications, and then you can see there's some of the key components in here. Right, so that you can see here, it also have the information as a key file. So this key file also copy to the NetWeaver administrator, so the NetWeaver Java instance, also copying here user SAP IDM key keys.ini. And then also this one as well, the JMX app also have the key file information. So this key file is in use in a lot of places. It acting as a authentication between the communication to the IDM database. So that in here, you can see that the communications in between the developer studio, so between this guy to the runtime dispatcher until the VDS, it all using the key file to authenticate the communications. So next, we're going to talk about how do we import the ABAP sources to the IDM. So as you see that after, I have to go back here. Sorry, I have to erase here. Right. So after you install the developer studio and then you import all these items, so this package, like I said again, it's imported from the installation media. At that time I spent a little bit of time to find where these things are. So actually the thing is, when you the installation CD or package from the IDM, it has some of the components. So I wouldn't mind showing some of the things in here. How does a installation package look like? So installation package, go to the IDM Identity Management, so that you will find that in SAP, when they release the package, they always comes with the latest service pack. So in here, if you're extracting here, so all these are the components that can be installed into your infrastructure. You can see that the core component and the REST API, and then the runtime components, and then it has a portal contents, config LM and config MIST, and then this is portal federation, and then have logon help. This is for the self-registration logon help, and then also have the UIS. So this is the user UI, and then this is the UI file as well. So all these components, they can be installed, they can be what they call deployed into your infrastructure, and then the interface I will tell you one by one how they looks like. So at the time I have a little bit hard time to find where the package is located, and really it's located in here. So once you extract the IC code or SAR, it will shows up as this kind of directory, right? Have a IC code, and then in the configuration packages in here, you will find the SAP provisional framework. Provisioning framework has all the ABAP, have all these connectors, so that what you do is that you go to package here, and then you import all those things. So after doing that, you will be able to have the entries in here, so that you don't have to define these things one by one. So as an example, I define one of the things for myself to see how the thing looks like, and then I create a form. Basically, I create a form in here, the self-service assigned privilege. So how these things related to UI interface, as you can see here, after you develop something in the development studio, and then the user, actually they're using the end user UI, they will be able to see the components in here. So which means that after I create all of this, so let me see the self-service assigned privileges in here. So in here, so I'm using the MX person and the access control logon users for all the users. So after done that, so if I go to the user interface, so in this case the IDM, so if I go to HTTP, so in this case /PO and then /IDM. So this is what they call the user interface. Oh, sorry, had a port in here. So this they call user interface. So like I said, this one, after I create this package and define this stuff in here, and then self-service assigned privilege, this thing will shows up. Before then, this tab doesn't even have anything in here. So how these things are being utilized. So for example, I would like to create a ABAP connections. So assuming I would like to pull all the data from my existing ABAP instance. So in this case, for example, the S4 1610, so the latest one. So let me create a new one. For example, S4A or something, I forgot. Right. Just for demonstration purpose. So for example, in the S4 system, I already have so many users sitting in the systems. So if you go to SU01, so you can see there's a whole bunch of users already available in here. So for example, myself, I have my names in here. So for example, what's the information? So I have my name in here, and the only thing I pay attention to is the roles I create assigned to myself. So all these informations, it can be put into the IDM. So how that is utilized? So that's utilized by this package. You have to define this. In this case, this package is imported from the SAP standard delivery. So after you have this, you can see that in the specification server, you have these items in here. So how these items shows up in the user interface? So if you go to the user interface, you have nowhere you can find this information. So instead you have to go to here, you go IDM, you have to go to administration, right? Admin. So in here, in the system configuration, as you can see, this morning I just finished the R1CUA repository. So what happens that I can show you as a demo purpose. Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new repository. For example, create a new repository. I call it, for example, R2, and then connect it to my S4 1610. So this thing, I'm sure lowercase up to 6 characters. So if you put more than 6 characters, I think it give warnings. So in here you will find that, right, about specific application server, about load balancer. So this thing actually matches the one I just showed you. Right? So it has the repository type, the one that you define in here. It shows up in the IDM administration interface. So this means that you can develop your own connectors to be able to connect to the external source. So for example, you want to connect to some of the other interface or your own applications. The good example is some of the companies have their own third-party applications. So those third-party applications, it's not really provisioning by any of the software. So in this case, it gives a chance to customize the connectors to connect to those customized software to have their attributes to be loaded into the IDM. So in this case, you can see that this is available. How many items available? So it has ABAP, application server, load balancer connectors, AS, Java, DB, LDAP. Oh, sorry, yeah, maybe close it. So go back here again. So I'm trying to show you this. So in here, and then Active Directory dual step application, so SCI Sun GRC10. So this matches the one that what we have seen in here. GRC10, there must be a repository type called GRC10, right? Even the naming matches. So some things like the form HTML, so this one doesn't have a repository, right? This is empty. And then AS Java, you can see that in here what kind of repository type it has. It has AS Java DB and AS Java LDAP. AS Java DB and AS Java LDAP, right? As you can see here, the supported type is defined in your Eclipse or HANA Studio. So which means this application is highly customized, can be developed by the developers or administrators. In this case, I would say this is more like a task for developers to create these kind of repository types. So in this case, so for example, I would like to put like R2 underscore 610. Not sure if the length is good enough. So I choose ABAP specification server. So click OK. Too long, right? R2, for example, S4. Click OK. So in this case, I create the new ones in here, and then you can see these connections. These are the names available for connections. Where are these things coming from? As you can compare in here, if I double click the, oh, sorry, it's not load balancing, it's application servers. So if you go here, ABAP specification server, you can see that all these are defined in the NetWeaver, sorry, in the Eclipse. So these items, JCode, client, something, and then descriptions, repository content, the category, and then strings, how many length, and the default values in here, it's defined in these applications. So that in this case, we have to put the information in here. Do it very quickly. So the JCode client A host. So this is what host name or IP address. I will put like for example short S for APP in there. So client of the communicator users in here. I would like to put maybe what's that 100. And then gateway can password communicating users. So this is the users in there. And then there's a username in the bottom. For some reason they didn't put the username and communication. They should put it together. Like client users, you could put. So what happens that there's a standard role delivered by the SAP for the IDM, for the profiles. So the network speed is really an issue. So in here you can find out there's some of the roles already being predefined for the IDM. So SAP Star IDM. So these roles are already available for the communicator users. Normally this role, SAP BC SCC IDM communication, this role is enough. to support this connectivity. If we go and take a look at this role, so what happens that what this role has, it has some of the RFC authorizations. You can see it has the RFC, SRFC authorizations, and it has a whole bunch of the user related, user AGR, user this and that authorizations. So it has kind of full control of the user. So the reasons that these communication users are also in use to create users and maintain user, assign roles, and so on. And they also have a plog for sure. So what happens that like this role, you would like to copy to something else. So in this case, normally I don't use a standard SAP role. So in this case, you can use whatever you call a Z something, right? And then you do a copy all. You just generate on the fly. Leave it as is. And then you create your own IDs. But in this case, this S4 is managed by CUA, so that I cannot create a user. But the IDM COMM user already existing is in there, right? I created before. So you notice that the user type has to be system, and it has a production password. So in this case, I'll put the username jcode client users IDM COMM, and then the password in here. And what else? There's also a system number. Let me see, where's the system numbers? So this is client 100. Yes, system ID. This one is S4A. Then there's also system number in client. So system number is 00. So this is complete. So we try to save it, and then we can do a test. Like the jobs in here, you can do an initial load. So after you click the initial load, what it will going to do is going to connect it to this ABAP backend, and then put all the identities over to where? Over to the Oracle database. So let's try to run the jobs, because let me see if anything that. So in the CUA master in here, you may notice it's false. By default, it's false. If it's CUA, like this morning, I just put like CUA systems, it's a true. I would like to see that all those identities are already existing in the system. So if I go into put it again, what happens? Because the CUA, I will show you a little bit later. So client, let me see what else need to put in language, English. Okay, so let's try to run the job. See if anything definition is wrong, the job will fail right away. So run now, right? Click the run now, refresh. What happened on demand? Could not start job with this thing, right? It has error right away. So what happens if we go to monitoring, the job log? Why you cannot finish it? This is a CUA that I just run in the morning. This one's good. Client, MS host, S4A, the S4A, S4A. Yes, save. Right? So right now it's running. So when it's running so let me see, we'll refresh, it's running. And then back to in here, you will be able to see the job status in here as well. So we go here, if you go jobs. So it's a specific application server job initial load. This is the definition for the jobs. then the job log. Right in here, you can see this one is running. Right, the one that when I just submitted from the user interface, the administration interface, you can see the job is running using your identity management in the HANA Studio or in the Eclipse. You can see that the status of job is running. And then meanwhile, you can also go back to the management interface. In here, you can also see it running as well. So if we go to job status, so if you pull down to the very bottom, you will find your job is running. Right. So this one initial load. So this one idle. So this is the one. So this one. Oh, sorry, this one. Specific. Okay. So this one is running. Right. Initial load. The job 167 is running. And then there are more information. You can see the administration tab in here, the system logs. So this is the morning, in the logs in the morning. Execution log, initial load. So this is one that we just submitted, initial load. Right, 2022. It gives you a lot of information to see what kind of the identity is copied to your Oracle database. In this case, it's the IDM Identity Center database. Anyway, while this thing is running, I'd like to show you some of the informations in the IDM. Oh, this thing's really slow. Why? So if we go to the IDM user interface, if I want to see the user, so like in this case, I already put the users this morning. For example, if I try to search myself, right? So this thing will show in as all the informations here and there. It has assigned roles and privilege, assigned roles, assigned group settings in here. So if you want to find somebody else, actually myself is a perfect example. So right now you can see that assign privilege. So where does a privilege means that so after you pull all the information from the ABAP systems, if it shows up as a privilege in your IDM interface. In this case, if I do comparison on what I see in the CUA, too slow. So CUA. If I look at the CUA, see my roles assigned. So we have different systems. So for example, the A4H client, so this is S4 1511. So this one is A4 A100. So this one is the S4 1610 systems. Besides the roles, you will also find has profiles assigned to myself. So for example, SAP old, SAP new, those sort of things. So how these two items presented in the IDM systems, if we go back to here, you will find that it's showing up as something like here. So it shows that as a privilege, PIV profile, and then comma R1 CUA. So this is the repository that we install in here. So here, right, we just import the R2. The R2 we just imported is showing as a duplicate records in there. So Wireshark, I will find Wireshark, for example, Wireshark star. So we update it in here. Right. Value from, value to. So these rows, because I upload the backend CUA system first, and then I do an upload on the S4 again. So right now it shows up as R2 S4, the Wireshark. It put up in here. So when I look at this role, what happens that I can also choose the task, right? Choose task. You can see privileging here. You can delete the privilege, meaning delete the roles, and then you can also display in here. So you can also see assign identities. I would like to see that this role, how many users got assigned, so that you can find all these users have this role assigned. And then what else we see here? Assign groups. I don't have any groups assigned. Account attribute. Nothing in here. General attribute. Just my name. So this information match the one from the CUA. In this case, the S4. So myself, there's a function. So function doesn't really shows up because it doesn't have the columns. And then associate with company address. So the company address in here. So this shows that. So this is one of the examples that we pull the. So already listed. So we have all the information coming from one of the backend ABAP databases. So in a migration plan, I will show you the migration plan in one of the documents. Because some of the companies they vendor using the IDM. Let me see CUA. There's a chart in here, right? So this is the migration plan that demonstration to some of the clients when they have their system in the back end. Where is it? Why do you think that shows up? Let's try this way. What? Why that page? Right. So in this page. So this is what I'm going to talk about, because when you try to sell the IDs for the IDM to the companies or some of the client may question you, may challenge you, what's the value that brought to the companies using IDM? Because IDM, even though it's like a small piece of software in the big SAP family, but to be able to implement it, the implementation also costs a lot of money and efforts. So what's the value that brought to the company using IDM? It's not only saying that the streamline all the user provisioning and the role assignments very easy and manage multiple applications of system across the landscape, but also you would like to emphasize the time they spend on the user administration provisioning, and then the user onboarding process becomes so much easier. So let's go this way. For example, before then, if you want a new employee onboarding, you have to maybe have email, SAP portal, and then also have other Unix systems here and there. And then you have to escalate all the tasks to everywhere, including, hey, let's say a Unix administrator and Linux administrator, can you please create this ID here and there? This costs a lot of time. By using IDM, you can easily streamline and put all the information into the all-in-one spot, and then you can create the users easily. So like some of the companies in this chart, it shows how the traditional SAP companies that have their user provisioning. So you can see in this what most the companies are doing today. So they have the email system, have the portal. So email also contain an Active Directory. So when the user try to log in, so they have to manage the email here, and then portal, the NetWeaver Jar instance. And then they're using CUA to manage multiple SAP applications. So this is exactly what we have shown you. So how to implement IDM? IDM can go in here. So first you go to the temporary. It's more like it's not a final form. But first using IDM to manage the portal and email separately, and then IDM connect to CUA, and then CUA connect to the tri systems. So this is what we are doing in here. So what we are doing in here exactly this case. So we're using IDM to pull all the information from the CUA, and then I'm able to manage all the user using the CUA. And then the final form will be get rid of CUA instead of using the IDM to manage directly all the applications. So in this case, the CUA is completely retired. So the company doesn't use CUA anymore. Because like I said, CUA is like more like 10 years ago, the pretty old technologies, even though it's still in use today, but compared to the functionality of IDM, this CUA can be retired. So after you have all these information, you build all the repositories for each system, like R3, R2, S4, and then for example for R3 and then R3 BW and R4 something. Repository, you can build 10 repository in here. And then you will be able to pull all the information for the ABAP systems. But meanwhile, you can also create a new repository to LDAP. So for example, LDAP, right? Active Directory. So in this case, I'll put a R3 LDP, right? So that you can go here as well. So when you go to LDAP, you can see the definitions. You have to define all the information in here as well. Right. So LDAP host in this case, I would like to put my name. Let me see. Right. So LDAP host. Is the domain, this thing, examples, UPN. Yeah, this thing I'll just do examples. I'll show you these things. Okay, CN equal to myself. Password. Right. So I'm doing this. So all the port right now is just 389. This thing should work. Something wrong here. Job started. Right, job started, so it started running to pull all the information about LDAP. So wait until this job finishes, and then I will be able to see the identity showing as some information about my LDAP users. The LDAP user will show up in here. So all this information, where is it stored? It's stored in the Oracle database. So in this chart, again back to this chart. So like I said, how this thing works, I would like to review this thing again. So we define the repository in the Develop Studio, and then we run it using the end user, and the IDM admin. We use the IDM administrator, the user interface to connect to here the admin UIs, and then I'm able to pull all the information from, let's say we just done for S4 and then also for the LDAP. And then you're running via a dispatcher. So dispatcher information is also showing up in here. I'll show you the dispatcher where it shows. So dispatcher, monitor. So in monitor, you can monitor your dispatcher status. So this dispatcher in here shows running. So this dispatcher, where is the dispatcher? So this, like I said, this is the dispatcher. This guy is running. You can have more than one dispatcher running in there as well. Dispatcher. And then the runtime. And then the VDS, we have not talked about the VDS. So VDS, we install in the same server. So after, what is VDS? Virtual Directory Server. So after we put all the LDAP, the identity into the Oracle database, into the core components, and then this virtual directory server, you can look at all those identity users in a LDAP form. So for example, in here So all these users, they are loaded from the backend database. So they're loaded from the backend ABAP instance. So after you look at this, you will see they're showing up as a form of the LDAP, more like Active Directory form, and then it's listening to port 389 in the local host. So you have an easy way to manage all these users. So this happens as you pull all the identity from different applications, including your third-party applications, or you pull all the identity from your Unix or Linux or Oracle, all kinds of database, or SQL Server, DB2, or HANA, and whatever. They're all showing as an entry. It's emulating a LDAP entries, so that you can see the attributes in and there. And this is what we call the virtual directory server. So whatever I had talked about here, in the very beginning, I already said the database is very important. You have to keep your database up and running all the time, because, like I said again, all these key components, they communicating, they connect to the database, and then they're extracting all the informations, and then they communicating to the backend system as well. In this case, it didn't highlight the one that for those connectors, but we can go back to this chart. So Identity Management Business Suite, not this one. Right, so we go back to this chart. So use identity management, we're using the user interface to manage all these kind of connectors in here. And this document, it's IDM connectors, so you can see how many connectors it supports. You can see overviews in here. Right, so you can suppose index by connector name, so you can see this supports also like I mentioned, the AIX. So for example, you want to use your SAP IDM to create an AIX ID, yeah, you can do it as well. But these things, you can see there's something by the company, means that this is more like a third-party applications. So this one's by nature is not really supported by, it's not developed by SAP, but developed by the third-party company, and then supported by them as well. IBM ICF, so this is more like the mainframe ZOS applications. And then the SharePoint by something, right? You can see the by different connectors. So this thing, what I can think of is this company, they will deliver they will deliver something similar to this thing, similar to the packages. So when they release the package, you will be able to find that their packages is under their company's name, and they support the connectivities to these applications. You can see that the Salesforce, CRM, they support, they develop by identity for, so this is like a company, right? In here, you can also scroll down back and forth. So these are all by the company. So these connectors all developed by third-party companies. So what I mean is that the connectors is highly customized, and it requires a lot of development efforts, you see, by different companies in here. So why it's so hard to develop? Because as you can see here, it's not only contains the repository type, right? Repository type is the names of the key items to map into the Oracle database backend. And then here it also have, see, this one has all kinds of script, right? The script is, you can see the script, right? So this all the development efforts, right? So you can see, so the MX something, so this all the backend database, right? So all these development efforts has to be done by someone. By who? By those companies, right? So to be able to connect to the backend systems, you require a lot of development efforts, right? So this is the script, and besides script, we also have constants, right? And then processes, plugins. In plugins, right, you can see that in the ABAP case, for ABAP, you can create users, create groups, modify users, enable users, and so on. We can take a look at the create users to see what it's doing, right? So I have the flow charts in here, the task here and there. So all these are, like I said, all these are development efforts, right? And then what else we have? Create user. So these are plugins, and then triggers, and then it has a whole set of utilities. Log modify, set task error state. So all these are development efforts. So you can see that I also have a jobs in here. Initial load, right? Oh, sorry, this is up. So we go up. So the jobs, we have initial load, we have reset data, and then here. So you set the initial load, how it loads in that way. So it has all the things in here. Right, create account attribute. It's more like a workflow. Right, wait 15 seconds to avoid provisioning this and that. So the logs of all these jobs can be viewed in here. In the monitoring in here, if we go into the job status, also the job log, execution log. Right, so these are all the message for the execution log. Provisioning monitor, not this one, sorry. System log, job log, system log. So all this should be the one I should look at the system logs in here. Well, I don't see the job status. Not job status, job log. 167. Job log. Right, so the job logs, all the job logs you can see here for that particular items. Verify attribute, adjust. So where these things come, so it's coming from here. So it defines all the steps for the jobs, and then you can finish the initial load. Otherwise, if you don't, if you don't import this package, the functions in here won't be available. So like I said again, all the connectors, it involve a lot of development efforts. So these development efforts are supported by all the third-party companies. But some of them, if it doesn't emphasize anything in here, doesn't say buy something, that means that it's supported by SAP's own. Right, SAP HANA database. Right, this is an example of SAP's own connectors, HANA database. Right, it must have something called HANA, right? Connector HANA. So this one you can also connect to the HANA database to have all those informations. So go back to this document to see what else it have. So this one highlights all the connectors available currently in the market. So SAP by default, it doesn't really support a lot of the connectors. So for example, it doesn't support any of the Unix or Linux connectors. And where's the and then the MS Exchange is support by native Active Directory. So this is the Active Directory we just tried, and then Lotus as well. So we see Office 365 connectors. Yes, it's by third-party company as well. Business Object BI platform is by FoxySoft. Hey, I heard of FoxySoft. I heard of this name before. CRM, Customer Relationship Management, is supported natively. Is that true? I don't really see any CRM stuff in here. Is that this one custom? No. BWAS Java AD. AD is Active Directory. So SuccessFactors connectors support natively. SuccessFactors right now is used a lot in the SAP's HR systems. SF, right. So in here it's supporting here. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. And you guys have any questions? Right now it's more like in the Q&A sections. If you have any question, you can either talk or type in here. Let me see if I can able to help you guys out. By the way, the IDM it doesn't really have a very huge market, because right now what happens that the companies doesn't really realize the value that brought to them by using the IDM. And also you can see in here, one of the reason is SAP itself doesn't support a lot of the connectivities other than SAP's own product. So a lot of things, even though they claim they are able to support it, but you can see that developed by other third-party companies. X generic ASCII interface. Yeah, so this one is the type database generic database connector. So this one by native is supported. I think it's done in here. If you try to create a new package, let me see. I'll put custom JDBC in here. Type template, right? So in here, right, you can see the template. You have all of this. You have database, right? Database type name, let's say Oracle. Let's say this, right? So Oracle's in here, JDBC drivers, all this and that. You can easily connect to Oracle as well. So this is called the native items. So like I said, right now the IDM looks to me is more like a new market in the whole SAP's landscape. Even though the IDM started from their version 7.2, that shows up, I think, at least like 5 years ago. But so far, there's not too many companies buying this idea. One of the reasons is that companies get used to using their CUA or their basic SAP management. Another thing is that not all the companies are running SAP as their major software. So some of the companies are using SAP as a very small portion of their applications. And then by applying a lot of company policies, so let's say you create a Unix ID, Linux ID, you need to follow this form and require this unique UID, GID, this and that. So these pieces, they don't believe the SAP IDM can manage that thing very well. Another reason is the complexity of the IDM software in the landscape perspective is it's not really that easy. If you go here, even though the company looking at this chart, it feels very complicated. So one of the reason is it requires, like, I won't say like a dedicated Java instance running there. In this case, actually, we in our demo environment, we're using the PO or process orchestration to host the IDM components in there. By the way, I didn't mention that the latest version of IDM, when you try to deploy those components, what you're using the host control, you're using the latest SUM interface. In here, I write all the procedure into my forums, so that if you have any question, you can ask in here as well. So you can see that when you try to deploy all the components in here, you have to use the SUM. So this is the only acknowledged way that done by SAP. So the SUM, you're using that to deploy this component. This is one of the examples. And then in the very end, we also have other examples in there as well. And we can also deploy 3D components on the row. You don't have to deploy the component one by one. So let me see where I also have a screenshot showing the 3 component deploy at the same time. Right? So in here, deploy IDM, user interface, REST interface, and UI5 together. So today I didn't have a chance to to show you how the UEFI interface looks like, but you have to hook up with the UEFI using the REST interface. It doesn't really support in the native mode, so it means that the Nebula J2E engine doesn't really have UI5s in there by default. So this is where how to deploy those components, which shows up in here. So when you try to deploy like these 4 components, right, IST API, and main UIs, the end user UIs, and the Web Studio, you're using SUM, the latest SAP SUM, to deploy all these components in here. So we are talking about why not too many companies realize the value that brought by the IDM. One of the reasons is that companies feel it's really complicated to manage or to send a whole team to manage the IDM, because like this task, for example, the installation task is not like an easy task can be achieved by a security administrator, because what you can see here, most of the tasks that done in here is belong the consultants doing this kind of deployment. It's best to have some system administration background, and then chances are it also needs a basis help, and in this case myself, I'm doing a lot of basis tasks, so I didn't feel any challenge to doing all kinds of these tasks. But when I asked some of my clients why they hesitated to doing this kind of work, so their reaction is, so first of all, their basis not really feel comfortable to doing all this deployment, and secondly, that the security administrator doesn't have the knowledge to manage the system in a database, in an LDAP, or in a basis perspective. In a SAP Java applications, they're not really sure what these things are, because when you see that in the middle of it related to a lot of basis tasks that not all the security administrators feel comfortable to, because like I said, most of the security administrators or security consultants, they're highly skilled into, let's say, the GRC or the PFCG roles or the portal roles piece. But when you ask them to some of the basis related areas, they feel very uncomfortable, because all these things related to these items, for example, the key to the imported certificates, the security administrator doesn't know how to do it. So the companies always feel hesitated, is it worth to put that huge amount of effort to implement IDM? Does it really save the company a lot of efforts, save the company a lot of monies in the future, or bring into a lot of simplify or streamline the procedure at all? At this moment, I would say yes, but IDM, let us say again, it's very useful when a company is very large and it has SAP as a mainstream software, and meanwhile we have other third-party software as well. It's ideally that companies have their HR systems, that have their Active Directory system, and then have the multiple SAP backend system together. Then this is a perfect example, and it's an ideal environment to encourage the company to use IDM to manage all these products. So this is my personal opinion. And according to some guys asked me, what's the salary of the IDM consultant? I would say because the skill set of the IDM, it's not really common in this area, so that the salary or the hourly rate, it's above average. I would say it's more than a basis administrator or more than a security. I mean, that's for sure. But you won't be able to find many opportunities in the market to asking for IDM consultant or IDM implementation consultant. Why the reason is, like I said again, because the company doesn't really feel it's worth to put that amount of money to support this kind of applications, unless I am looking forward to the near future the SAPs that emphasis or strengthen their connectors to let the companies feel comfortable it's worth to put that amount of money to implement the IDM, to manage all the policy or the user provisioning or the role, including the GRC as well. Anyway, so tonight this is what I'm going to talk about. And if you have any questions, you can also left a message in my forums, and I can be contacted in here as well. You can also call my phone if locally, and then you can also go to my website to leave any message. But the most convenient is that you can subscribe to my YouTube. If you're watching at my YouTube, you can subscribe to that. Any questions?
Hi Adam, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
you should also in your website you should that there's a place you have to generate the key or SSL certificate. If not, they will have error. Can you talk more about that? How do you exactly generate that certificate and the input?
Certificate, right?
Yes.
So what certificate is that? So in the IDM, it has an installation document. There's a step it's talking about in when you try to connect using the studio, right? So we go back to the configuration of studio in here. So the studio have to connect to the HTTPS port. So in this case, we put 50,001 as HTTPS port, but most of the company they put either 443 or 44300 as their HTTP port. So where these configurations are, so this is purely a SAP NetWeaver AS configuration. I can show you where it is. So if we go to the NetWeaver administrators, so let me where I go to. So if we go to my so in this case we go here. So this is our latest SAP NetWeaver 7.5. You see the 7.5, 7.4 and 7. Actually, 7.4 should have similar interface in here. So what you do is that you go here in configurations, and then there's somewhere in the HTTP provided destinations and scenarios. Sorry, there's the HTTPS configuration somewhere. ABC. Go back. This is Java system connectivities. Java configuration browser. Not really. Not here. Single sign-on. Because there somewhere you can configure the HTTPS connections. So Java system not here. Place. Not this one. Single sign-on, trusted system, SSL. So it's not in here as well. So in here, right, you go to the SSL. I know that because like different versions of NetWeaver shows up differently. So what I go to is you go to the configuration part, and then you go to security, and then there's the SSL portions in here. By default, this guide has it doesn't have a valid ticket files in there, and then by default it doesn't have ports in here. So what happens is you have to create a SSL credentials in here. So after you created this credential, and then you will be able to create a key pair as well. So in click this, right? So in this is the certificate that you can export. So when you try to export this guy, you can export this one as either this one or that one. But in my document, what I'm saying that I export this key, the private key. I export it as a PKCS8, and then in here you can actually download X509 certificate in here as well. So this X509 certificate you can also download it from here. You can also download this one as an X509 certificate. And then another method I can say is that once your applications are up and running, you can also download your certificate from your web page. So let's say you put HTTPS in here, .po, and then 50,001, right? So in here, what you do is that you can also download the certificate from here as well, because there are multiple ways you can download your certificate in here. You can also export in here as well, X509, right? You can also export in here as your certificate, so that after you export it, then you add into your Java runtime key store. So how to add in, I've already highlighted in here. So so in here you're using no, not here. Try to find where there's right. So in here, if you don't install your SSL client certificate into your Java runtime key store, you will have this error: logon failed unrecognized SSL message. So what you do, you have to use the command line key to import, and then you put an alias in here that this is the file you just download, SSL credentials cert1.crt, and then the key stores CA cert. So where this CA cert is acting as a wallet, so it normally has the password in here. So after you do that, you can insert, actually you save your certificate into that key store, right? So that this one you can see that here, right? Owner, this and that. So this is the certificate that we just saved from the from where's the west page. It's open too many pages. So this is the one that we just saved from. Oh, what is too many? Right, we just saved from here. SSL credentials cert.crt or something. Right. So this basically is just very basic SSL handshake from the client software to the target. Is that answering your questions?
Yes, thanks. So is that so? SAP portal or some other products also use a similar way, right? Doing the SL certificate, right?
So SAP portal, as I already mentioned here. So once you configure your SSL provider in a portal, in this case, right, you can see that once you create by default vendor default installation of SAP, it doesn't have SSL in here. So after you install, you create this, this is a private key, and it's acting as issuing all the SSL certificate. So that after that is configuring here, you can go into your HTTPS. Right. Actually, you know what? Go back here. Right. You can go HTTPS /PO 5001, right? Right, so we can see that here is the HTTPS connections, and then this certificate is exactly the same as we just seen there. So right, you can see here /PO, and then right 2017 February 24, which I generally configured on Friday. So this is the what we have seen in here. So we configure this one, and then this acting as an SSL provider, and it's listening on this port 50,001. Right? Any questions? If you delete this one and then you restarted the ICM, and then your HTTPS service will not be available. So this is the latest NetWeaver 7.5, how they handle the HTTPS connections. Because why the NetWeaver, why the identity management require this kind of specific client certificate? Because by default it doesn't know which key store it goes to, because this one, as you know, it's running Eclipse basically is application running based on Java. Java runtime, the JRE environment, it have its own key store in there, as we just seen here, right? If you go preference, if you go to Java, you can choose a different JRE, but in this case, you can see that it's running in here. If I go to that directory, right? This is a directory, the runtime that we have. So it doesn't copy. Copy paste. What the heck? So eDrive. So eDrive HDV Studio plugins. Plugins, and then come.SAP IDE, right, this one, and then JRE, and then in the library part you can see the security in here. You have CS certs in here. So I copied these two files, right? So you can see these two files, right? So this is the file I just download in there, and then it has all the informations in here, right? So I using the key tool to install this certification into the CS certs, into this security store, so that the Eclipse, or in this case, the HANA Studio, will be able to find the client certificate, so that it can finish the handshake to the NetWeaver servers. Right, so they can finish the handshake to this port, and then by default go to find the data source defines in there, so which I already mentioned in the very beginning. Right, the data source. So when the you know what? Another thing I would like to highlight is so one of the things in here, if you go to the custom data source. So this is the Development Studio. Another thing that this data source is in use connected to into your component. So this name, if you search the installation document, this name has to be matched. This name exactly the name IDM underscore data source, lowercase, uppercase. You cannot name it randomly as whatever. Otherwise, it won't able to connect. This one. So this one all connect to the database. So by the way, you're curious where this database is sitting at, because in theory it can install in anywhere. You can install in the SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, and so on. But for performance and for my personal interesting, I just choose the Oracle, and we just have the sole man have the Oracle running in there, so that I just install in there. I can telnet to that, so to show you how it looks like. Because the database server can sitting anywhere. Right. You can see that this one, right? It's is the listeners is sitting in there at the port 1521, and then the host name, and then this one as well. SLM IDM, so SLM. Oh. Right, so Oracle, right? Oracle 12.1. So this is the database that we are using, and then the schema and the table space that we created on that as well. As you can see here, you go to Oracle, you go into SLM, and then I create a directory for to hosting all these files, table space file, and then a temporary file in here as well. Alright, any questions? Other questions? Because the IDM, the one thing you will find that there's not too many document or discussion over the internet to talk about how to configure, how to set up the IDM. So all you have in hand is maybe the basic installation guide. But as you know, the SAP's installation guide is missing a lot of information. So if from the beginning to the end you install by your own, costs a lot of efforts. If you have any question, you can ask in here.
Adam, I noticed that for thanks for showing me the certificate you generated was issued to Shark PO and was also issued by Shark PO. So basically, it's self-signed, right?
Yes,
so which is okay in the lab environment, but in enterprise environment, sometimes they have auditing requirement. They need to be signed by root or third party, trusted party.
That's
so
correct.
how that works?
How that works? So normally, how that works is that you know that in here, right? It's not trusted because it's not signed by those trusted CA like VeriSign or all those kind of things. So how to do it normally in the private key. So when you can basically you can done in two ways. One way is that you're using SAP's command line called SAP Gen PSE to create a certificate request. We call CSR, and then send to those issuing organizations. For example, VeriSign. Another thing that you in the Java in the Java interface, I don't know if you have any GUI to do that, because there's multiple way you can do it, and it's very standard. Let me see if it has a way to create a. Let me see, like a CSR the request. Oh, it's not here. Go back. Operations. Security SSL. In here, right? You can see here. You can go to, so this is a private key, right? In the private key right now, it's signed by the self sign. So, but if you want to sign by VeriSign, what you do is that you generate CSR request. So in this case, right? For example, yeah, any of them. Say you download. So this thing actually I can download by a notepad. So let's say. So this is you can look at this. So what you do is that you copy paste this CSR and then paste to VeriSign's request. So if you Google search, so for example, you want to buy the service from VeriSign. So VeriSign right now it's owned by Symantec. Right, so what you do is that somewhere you can maybe it's enroll, right? So what you do is that you copy paste there, copy paste your VeriSign. In this case, I didn't have the login name, because normally, you know, if a company buy the service, you can log into their the VeriSign or the Symantec website. And then you copy paste your certificate request in here, and then they will reply to you. Let me see. They will send you back the reply so that you can load into your private key, and then your certificate will be signed by VeriSign. Right, so you can go edit. Right, so if you already generate a CSR sent to those publishers or issuer like VeriSign, Google, whatever, they trust it, and then when you generate a CSR request sent to them, and then they will send you back what they call CSR response. So what you do is that in here you load the response in here, and then after you load it, your certificate will become a signed by the trusted organizations. So the issuer name will not be myself. It will become something like Google, VeriSign, or Microsoft, or CA, or whatever. Is that answer your question? Is it clear?
Yes, thanks not. Thanks.
No problem. Because in here you may notice that after you using the self-sign, you will always have a triangle in here because the self-sign doesn't really trusted by the the issuer. All right, so no more questions. Because I know this is for the system administration. There's a lot of questions to be asked when you're doing the daily work, especially for this kind of smaller area like the IDM. Not too many companies using it. So a lot of administrators, they have to learn by themselves when they are doing the developers work as well. Because the HANA Studio or the Eclipse work, what I feel is really a challenge to myself. I have a hard time to understand all these kind of things, how that works. Because I know in the old days, in the IDM 7.2, they don't really use the Eclipse. Instead, they use more like MMC, like Microsoft's own console to do these kind of things, to view these things. But like only maybe the new versions, they start using Eclipse. And I feel this is very convenient for developers to do these kind of things. I would like to spend more time reading all those things. Maybe, I mean, if I have time, I would like to develop some sort of third-party connectors to see if we can sell those connectors to SAP. This seems like a good idea for developers. And honestly speaking, this is a good opportunity as well. Because sometimes you would like to create your own copyright software, right? You would like to create your own connectors and try to sell to the companies. Alright, so thank you very much for today, and we will see you next Saturday. Thank you.